We are live on Fantasy Football Today. DFS. My name is Sia Nejad. I'm with Meg Shoup and Mike McClure. We've got a lot to talk about. Meg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I am ready for week 4, ready for Thursday Night Football, ready for it all. Can't wait to get into it.
Mike, I was a little uncomfortable with last week's slate. I see there's a lot of people in the chat that had success. I didn't have the best week last week. I got to say, though, you mentioned it last week how pricing was, made things a little bit more difficult than it did week 1 and week 2. I feel a lot better about this week than last week. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely feel better about this week than last week. I think there's a lot of intriguing options, but I think it's really just the slate itself. There's a ton of high scoring games and games that you can attack this week. So I think that that really is what stands out more than anything.
Okay, we're going to do our game-by-game preview. We got 12 games. Just so you know, there's 4 on the 4 o'clock slate, 8 on the 1 o'clock slate if you want to dice things up and play different slates like we always recommend at the end of the show. Meg and I will do our cheat sheet, and Mike will do his top 3 at each position. A little quick peek at our cheat sheet right now, though, because it's time for the Hellman Stack segment where we discuss the QB and receiver duos to keep an eye on this coming weekend. Brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Mayo game day. Be delicious. Meg, I'm going to start with you. A little quick sneak peek at our cheat sheet. What's your favorite stack of the week?
Yeah, well, we have a cheat code this year. Just target the Washington secondary. So my favorite stack of the week is, of course, Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. It's gotten there every single week, as far as certainly from the receiver side and 2 out of 3 weeks from the quarterback side. So let's not overthink it, guys. Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. for me.
Yeah, and Mike, I have a feeling you might be on the same thing. You can give the same answer or a different one. What's your favorite stack of the week?
I'll certainly be on that stack, but I'm going to give you one that's a little spicy. I know you might disagree with me a little bit here, but I am all over Caleb Williams to Rome Odunze this week. When we talk about that Washington secondary, the Rams have been almost as bad. In fact, when you look at EPA per play defensively, they're 31st. Washington's 32nd, but the Rams at 31st are over double the EPA allowed of the 29th best team of the Jags. So the Rams in a normal year would be the last team by far. It's just this Washington secondary is historically bad. Well, again, the worst I've seen in the last 3.5, 4 years. So this is historically bad territory for the Commanders, but this is really bad for the Rams. So I'm going to be all over the Bears stacks this week in DFS.
How dare both of you? Just slandering the Washington Commanders in different ways. All right, Mike, I'm going to take a page out of your book from last week. I'm just going to go with the cheap option in Andy Dalton to Deontay Johnson. I believe that's 5,300 to 5,600. We'll clarify. I know that's what Andy Dalton is. We'll clarify Deontay Johnson's price as we go through the show. But I like that stack going against, speaking of bad defenses, going against the Bengals, Carolina at home, trying to run it back with the cheap quarterback receiver duo. I got to note this, though. This is pretty funny. Jason Hellman is in the chat. Literally, this is the Hellman's Mayo stack that we're talking about. And Jason Hellman says, yo, my favorite segment. I don't know if you're affiliated with the Hellman's brand, but either way, what beautiful timing from you. Thanks for being in here. Listen, we're going to talk about these stacks as the show moves forward. I'm very intrigued by that Rams-Bears game, both from a betting standpoint and a DFS standpoint. So, Mike, I know from a betting standpoint, I want to touch base with you on that. Let's start, though, with our first game. Saints plus 2.5 at the Falcons, 42-point total. I think this is an interesting game, Meg, from a volume standpoint with respect to the running backs. I think the receivers are also sneaky. Rashid Shaheed at 5,500, Chris Olave at 6,500. I don't know that I'm getting to this game, but I do think there's going to be some ownership, particularly with Bijan and Alvin Kamara for obvious reasons. Where are you at in this game?
For obvious reasons, Bijan and Kamara are definitely attractive targets, but it's more a case of, the total and me liking other games so much more that I don't know that I'll get to this game. You pretty much said it perfectly. So yeah. I don't know that I'll get to this game, but I see the point of the volume for some of these guys in this game.
Mike, this is so interesting to me because when you look at the rushing and receiving combos for just the entire running back slate, or really the entire slate, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson firmly at the top. There's a top 5 where the guys are between 93 and 105. These two are at the top, which leads me to believe that they're going to be pretty popular. Again, I don't know that I'm getting there because there's some pay down options I like about as good, but are you getting to Bijan or Alvin and anybody else in this game?
I'm actually not getting a lot of them on early runs, and some of it's the price point, and some of it's just the concentration of value. When we'll talk about them as we go game by game. But like guys like Cam Akers, super cheap. Carson Steele for Kansas City. There's just a number of cheap running backs out there. So my big interest in this game is actually Chris Olave. I think Chris Olave is one of the best plays on the slate at the receiver position. I think we saw him have a pretty solid game for how few points they scored last week against Philadelphia. And Philly's a team that's been able to generate a good amount of pass rush. But the thing that Philly does really well is they possess the football and limit possessions and limit opportunities. I expect the Saints to bounce right back in that department here. So when I look at Chris Olave, he's someone that I really want to target. We've seen a lot of the work early, hit the deep ball home run to Shaheed, and really just see all the Alvin Kamara action. But for me, this is going to be Olave territory over the middle. A lot like what we saw Rashee Rice absolutely torch this defense. I think Chris Olave is going to do the exact same thing in a competitive game. So Olave, by far, my favorite play in this game.
Okay, Olave, the favorite play. Certainly some people will be on the two running backs that we talked about, but maybe not so much this crew, me, Meg, and Mike. All right, let's go to the next game. It's the Bengals -4 at the Panthers, a 47-point total. I mean, you already know I kind of like this game, right? I just gave you my Hellman's stack, and I like Andy Dalton. Meg, I'll start with you again on this one. I like Andy Dalton. I like Deontay Johnson, and I like Mike's boy last week, Chuba Hubbard, who had a great game. On the other side, it's hard to argue with Jamar Chase. I'll probably be playing him at 7,700. I think some people will take the discount with T. Higgins at 5,900. Ishavas is 4,100. And then you got Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Kind of a lot to choose from here. And we've got a high implied totals from each team, 25.5 for the Bengals, 21.5 for the Panthers. What say you on this game?
You basically covered it. I like everybody in this game. I love this game. I mean, it's an obvious bounce back or get right spot for the Bengals. We thought it was going to be Monday. It wasn't. They need to get right. They need to get a big win. And obviously, I love both stacks in this game. I love your stack of Dalton to Deontay Johnson. I love Burrow to Chase. If you wanted to pay down or double stack that, you could go Higgins or Yoshavas. You could even target the tight end, Gesicki, or people are talking about Eric All from Min Price. I mean, there are so many options in this game. Then that you touched on the running backs. You could go to Chubbard or Moss and play it from that angle. Certainly from an early only slate, I could absolutely see me overstacking this game and just saying this is going to be the big game on the early only slate and just totally overstacking this game. But I even think you can play, 3, 4, 5 players from this game in Maine too. So I love this game, and I love both quarterback stacks in this game.
Yeah, Mike, your thoughts on this game? I mean, you could go all the way down to, because obviously Adam Thielen not playing in this one. I know somebody in the chat mentioned Xavier Legette at 4,800. God, I like Jonathan Mingo at 3,300. I just think there's so much you can do with this game. And Eric All at 2,500 allows your lineup to do a ton, especially if you're stacking Andy Dalton to Deontay Johnson. I mean, you can kind of do whatever you want. If you're doing that, throw in Jamar Chase, whatever you want to do. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think Deontay Johnson stands out for sure. Just the price point with the quarterback change. He's definitely talent-wise should be in that $6,500 range. I think he's going to be peppered with targets. But really, I like Cincy's side of this. I think the interesting call for me is going to be a decision on Jamar Chase for someone like Rashee Rice this week. So Rashee Rice, we know he's been absolutely dominant in terms of target share, but the matchup against this Chargers team for him, we'll talk about it later, but I think there are a number of paths to him, having his great game, but also having only 5 catches, 60 yards, and no touchdown because they don't need it in that particular matchup. So for me, I actually like Jamar Chase here, 7,700. It is an absolute desperation spot. We see in the chat, Jeffrey's talking about the questionable tag. I think it's mostly not a factor here. I think it becomes a factor if they lose another game. I think that shoulder starts to hurt a lot more at that point. But when I look at this spot for Chase, it's all systems go. They can still salvage the season with a win here. They have a relatively friendly schedule coming up over the next few weeks. So I like Jamar Chase here. I think he should be one of the top receivers on the slate. And in this particular situation, I think he should be priced about $9,000. I think he should be right at the top just because of the circumstances here. While the Panthers looked good last week, they played a very, very bad Raiders team. And they're still not a good team defensively. So I'm not saying it's going to be 7-on-7 like we saw against the Commanders, but it'll be close to that here. I think we see pushing and moving the ball between the 20s on both sides.
Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't you the one on this show last week that called Carolina to win outright
I did, yes.
in Vegas?
Yep.
That's impressive. Very, very impressive. Yeah, let me ask you this, because Meg did bring up Eric All. I brought up Jonathan Mingo. I think there's a lot of value options that we're going to talk about on this slate. And it leads me to almost the rhetorical question of, do we need to bother going down that low when there's value in other games? I mean, I kind of like throwing in Eric All at 2,500 and Mingo at 3,300, but maybe I'm forcing it.
Yeah, I think that it's fine. I really think it just depends on where you're going with your stack and what you're prioritizing. But I do think that there are a number of options at tight end to punt this week. One we'll talk about in the Arizona game, Elijah Higgins as well. I think that there are a number of options. So I do think that it will be relatively contrarian. I think the thing on all, though, is I want to caution and be careful on that sample size, because at the end of the day, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are still clearly going to be the top options in that offense. So I think it's fine, but I don't think it's the slam dunk free square that some might think.
Yeah. You said sample size, and I thought of Drew Sample, and I'm like, Mike's pulling out all the stops because he's on this team too. You can play him at 2,800. All right, Mike, I got to start with you on this next one. Rams at the Bears. It's only a 41-point total, but a decent implied total for the Bears at 22. You mentioned Caleb Williams to start out the show here. Listen, I don't know who to choose from at the receiver position. You mentioned Rome Odunze, but obviously DJ Moore in play. Keenan Allen looks like he's going to play. First of all, tell me who you like, and I'm going to circle back to the Rams +3 because that was a play I gave out yesterday on the early edge. I have a feeling I'm going to regret it because I have a feeling you like the Bears in this one, but let's not address that quite yet. What do you like in DFS in this game?
Caleb Williams. I like Caleb Williams a lot here. Look, I don't think he's anywhere close to where Jaden Daniels is, but I don't think that he's that bad, and I think he continues to take steps forward every single week, and the game's going to start to slow down for him. I love the fact that we get a home game here for him. It's really all about that Rams secondary, though. Again, they rate 31st in defensive EPA, only better than the Commanders, but they're literally giving up twice as much as team number 29 in Jacksonville right now. So these teams are both bad defensively, talking about the Rams and the Commanders. And that's where my concern is. You know, the Rams are a team that I've wanted to fade when they're on the road and back when they're at home, or at least in domes, right? So that team is absolutely built to play in controlled environments. Not necessarily the case here. Obviously, they had the benefit of having their first 3 games in the dome this season. They played the Lions on the road. They played the Cardinals on the road. They hosted the 49ers. So all controlled environments. Now they go to Chicago, where there will still be a home field advantage. So that is my concern. But I like what I've seen from Caleb Williams. We've seen the upside a little bit last week in terms of the passing yardage and fantasy scoring at 23 fantasy points. So I like this spot for him because I think they're going to be able to move the ball on the Rams. And then the Rams offensively are still good enough to push back. So I do like Caleb Williams. I'm pairing him with Rome Odunze just because of the price point, but mostly Caleb Williams and play it naked, right? I know he's not a massive rushing upside, but it's not that the rushing upside is 0. So I think that Caleb Williams, price point, we've seen the massive separation, almost $1,000 cheaper than Daniels at this point. For me, I'm going to play Caleb Williams and load up some of those other positions.
And forgive me real quick, did you say you could play Caleb Williams naked in this one? Because that's kind of what my preference would be. Yeah.
It'll be with Odunze or naked. Okay. Most likely naked or Odunze.
So, Meg, interesting one here. It's only a 41-point total, so maybe, some people turn away from it. But I like Mike's logic, and there are people, I should say one in particular, Kyron Williams at 7,300, who's just getting a ton of volume. Not necessarily in the passing game, but that could tick up. He's getting a ton of carries. I don't know that I want to make a decision on the receivers among the 4 that I think are viable for targets. I don't want to make a decision on Colby Parkinson when there's other tight end value. So 2 questions. Do you like Kyron, and do you like anything else in this game?
I like Kyron, but again, there are so many other running backs I probably like more. So, but I mean, the volume Kyron's getting is, you can't, it's unquestioned. It's just amazing. He got 3 touchdowns last week, I believe. So, and as far as Mike's point, I love his point about Caleb and the receivers. I just wrote down on my notes, Bears receivers ? Because I know I think I want to get to a Bears receiver. I don't know that I'll get to Caleb because I basically like 2 quarterbacks in but 2 games. So I like 4 quarterbacks and 2 we just covered, and 2 you could guess the other 2 basically. So I'm trying to whittle down my pool. Don't know that I'll get to Caleb for that reason, but I like the Bears situation for everything that Mike talked about the Rams defense. I just wrote Bears question mark because I believe Allen Keenan's going to be back. Obviously DJ Moore is still kind of the alpha, but Rome Odunze, obviously I see Mike's point about just going with Rome there. So I like being able to have conversations with you guys to help me decide, and Rome sounds like a great target, but I do like targeting a Bears receiver in this game.
Yeah, I think this could be for me a Caleb Williams naked week among a couple of other quarterbacks that we're going to talk about that I really like. Mike, I do have to circle back. I know you have something to say, and then I want you to comment on the line here because it was a surprise to me. Rams getting 3 points in Chicago.
Yeah, I'll comment on the line there. The Rams are extremely beat up, and they're just a team that is built to play indoors in the controlled environments. The home field advantage is there, but it's really the defense. The Bears have been a top 3 defense for me this season, and they've really kept them competitive in some of those games. You look at that game they lost to the Texans, they were extremely competitive in that game, all because of the defense. But as far as liking Caleb Williams, you look last week, he threw the football 52 times. Just the opportunity is absurd. 52 times at $5,600 against, again, number 31 defensively, the Rams, and playing at home this time. It's just a situation I want to be involved with. Even in that Texans game, 37 passing attempts in that one. In the Tennessee game, he got up to 29, and that was with all of the defensive scoring the other way and limited time of possession. But the upside is what I want to talk about. You look at last week, they had this game at Indy. 21-16 was the final score. He put up 23 fantasy points with 3 turnovers. With wow. 2 interceptions and a fumble loss, still scored 23 fantasy points with only 8 rushing yards, which is literally the floor in terms of the rushing yards for him. So Caleb Williams probably should have scored 35 fantasy points last week, which is absurd at that. But you see the upside, by far the easiest matchup they've had this season.
Yeah, that's a really solid analysis. I think I got to be on Caleb. I still hope the Rams cover +3 because I've already put that bet in. All right, let's move along. Speaking of receivers who we have question marks about, Meg, the Eagles play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's a 45-point total. This is ticked up a little bit. Eagles favored by 2 points. It went down. Oh, are we going to Eagles? Yeah, we're going to go to Eagles next. Eagles -2 at the Buccaneers. And this ticked up to 45. Again, Eagles were 2.5-point favorites. It's ticked down to -2. Meg, I'm going to start with you. How you feeling about the receiver room here? Because I still don't know if A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith's going to play.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical about either of them playing, and maybe now we see why Washington traded John Dotson because whoa, he hasn't done anything. So don't know that I have interest there. I think you would maybe pay down all the way for Johnny Wilson if you're looking at Eagles receiver if both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are out, or just pay up for Saquon Barkley, who's just a massive usage monster and looks absolutely amazing so far with the Eagles, and then of course Goddard, who had a massive volume game last week. So to me, it's either pay down for Johnny Wilson if they're both receivers are out, or go to one of the other skill positions that they're going to have to lean heavily into. Yeah,
Mike, your thoughts on this game? I mean, I think Saquon Barkley's likely to be pretty popular. He's getting a ton of volume. I don't know that I'm going to get to Dallas Goedert at 5,100. I think a lot of people are going to want to go back there, and I totally get it. I don't know that I'm going to get there. And I don't really like anything on the Tampa side. This game feels like a pass to me, but I think the Eagles side is at least interesting with maybe a run back.
Yeah, the Eagles are going to be interesting, at least while A.J. Brown is out and Devontae Smith potentially out and banged up. It changes the way they play, but it might give them a little, let them play to some of their strengths in terms of winning actual football games, which is not necessarily great for playing DFS. And the Eagles have just this unique ability. Kansas City's done it in the years past to just possess the football. And they by far, once again in the NFL, have the most drives with 10-plus plays by a wide margin. They've already done it over 11 times this season. And that's good and bad. It's bad when you're talking about overall game environment because they will take half a quarter at a time. They're very, very limited possessions. We might have some weather in this from the hurricane as well, so we're going to have to deal with that. All of those things lead itself to the Eagles staying on the ground with that ground game. I think Saquon Barkley is fine. He's by far the running back that I would prefer to spend up on, only just from a volume standpoint. I think he's going to be heavily involved. If they fall behind in this game without those receivers, it's Dallas Goedert and Saquon Barkley. Yes, they can. Like we mentioned Johnny Wilson. I want Johnny Wilson to be good. The frame that he has is absolutely ridiculous. Just the size. I just don't think it's there. I think the best case scenario with Wilson is you throw a jump ball to him and he draws a pass interference penalty. Like that's the game plan for the Eagles with Wilson. So for me, Saquon Barkley is really the piece I would want here. Dallas Goedert secondary, just because of the volume, he could still get there even with the chalk. Other than that, I'm off of it. I'm completely off the Tampa Bay side. Any
opinion on whether AJ Brown or Devontae Smith end up suiting up?
I would say no. No chance on AJ Brown. They're not going to mess with that on a wet field on the road. It's just no chance. As far as Devontae, still too early, but I'm trending towards them both being out.
See, that's what I was trending toward. And before we get to Broncos Jets, I got to ask you, Buccaneers +2 at home without 2 safety blankets for Jalen Hurts. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the Eagles side slightly. I made the number all the way up to 4 still, but I'm much higher on the Eagles than a lot of people. I still have them as one of the best teams in the NFL, should easily be 3-0, and they just are very good at possessing the football. So, I think that it's really a great team that's set up really well to win a lot of football games, but not quite the fantasy goodness that it might look like on paper with the names that they have.
Yeah, Mr. Nice Guy says, stay away and bet the under in this game. I don't hate that, the way the Eagles possess the ball and have long drives. And he also said Caleb with DJ Moore seems like DJ Moore a potential game. And I actually really like that because DJ Moore is just expensive enough. Mike, I think too, and I know we're going back a game for a second, but he's just expensive enough, I believe at 6,700, for people to just defer to another receiver. I suspect DJ Moore is going to be a little bit lower owned than many anticipate. Do you happen to be looking at that?
Yeah, it definitely will be lower owned.
Okay.
And I wouldn't be shocked if they use him as an extension of the run game. I mean, they always kind of do anyway, but I'm talking like actual carries in this game. I think Swift's days are essentially done. I think we see Roschon Johnson here. It'll be an interesting time for sure. But again, for me, the primary target is still Caleb Williams, and wouldn't be afraid to play it naked.
Yeah, for the record, I smashed on props last week, and one of the props I'm looking at, I'm kind of waiting to see if the line moves or the juice moves, is going to be DeAndre Swift's longest rush under. And that's partly because, and right now I think it's at 10.5. I'm kind of hoping it might move to 11.5, but it's partly because of opportunity, because I do think Roschon Johnson's going to get a few more carries. But also they just simply can't run the ball. So that DJ Moore angle extension of the run game makes a lot of sense. All right, let's go to the run game in New York. New York Jets hosting the Denver Broncos. Pretty paltry total here, 38.5. Broncos getting 7.5. Does seem, Mike, I'll start with you. It does seem like maybe a Breece Hall game. He should be pretty popular, should get a lot of volume. I think some people are a little nervous about the Braylon Allen experience because he looks really good too. And I don't think if he's going to look this good, I don't think there's a reason to give Breece Hall 90% of the touches necessarily. With all that said, I don't think I'm on Breece Hall. I don't think I'm on Braylon Allen or really anybody in this game. I don't like either side. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's mostly going to be a situation where you're going to avoid. Again, the Jets, I think they're going to be a great real-life football team winning football games. They are built to do that. Aaron Rodgers is just absolutely elite. That's by far the slowest pace of play in the NFL. They're so good at killing clock, milking clock, possessing the football. I'm not going to be on Breece Hall because, again, I think real football is going to take precedent here, and it's going to be a timeshare in that backfield as an effort to keep both of them healthy for a playoff run, and that's where I think it's at. So the only play I think you could probably talk me into here is if you like the Broncos side and you think they can push. I actually think Tyler Conklin is still sneaky. I think Aaron Rodgers really likes throwing the football to Conklin, and I think Conklin is the guy that is going to get left open every single time. When you got situations like a target monster, I say target monster, one of the first looks is obviously going to be Garrett Wilson. He's going to draw the most attention, et cetera, right? But Allen Lazard, everyone knows the chemistry is there, and they know that's a second read. So I really think that when you have the dual threat running backs, which Allen and Breece Hall can both catch passes out of the backfield, I really think Conklin is the guy that goes underlooked. So in competitive games, Conklin is the guy. He's only 3,600 at tight end here, but I think that there's a number of tight ends to play on this slate. So it's more of a 20-plus lineup kind of play. And then, of course, the Jets defense in play.
All right, husband Kimmel says Jets DST. That certainly makes sense. Mike just said that as well. Meg, anything in this game that you like besides potentially the Jets defense?
Well, I had Conklin written down, so that's cool to hear Mike say that. I like that. So I actually do like Breece Hall a little, but it's hard because there are so many running backs at different price points that I'm interested in. But he's got a good matchup. I know Braylon Allen looks amazing. Like you said, they want to break up that workload. But Hall is still getting the high value, high leverage touches and a lot of targets. So for that reason, I want him in my pool still. I don't know how often I'll get to him, but I want him in my pool still.
Yeah, there are guys like Breece Hall. We talked about Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson that we've said on this show we don't love. That doesn't mean we're going to have 0% of those players. It just means we're going to be maybe under the field. I mean, and for some of these guys, I actually won't be playing them, but I'm sure I'll fit a few lineups in with some of these guys that we're not super high on relative to the industry. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Hellman's Stacks segment, brought to you by Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Just like these QB and wide receiver duos, tailgate snacking and Hellman's Mayonnaise make the perfect combo, bringing out the rich and creamy taste to all your game day dishes. So give it a try, and may your game day be delicious with Hellman's Real Mayonnaise. Shop at your local Walmart, Kroger, or grocery store and add some extra deliciousness to your game day dishes this football season. We've got 3 more games on the 1 o'clock slate, 4 games on the 4 o'clock slate, our cheat sheets, our top 3 at each position. We're going to do it all right after this message from our partners.
A Quiet Place Day 1 is now streaming on Paramount Plus. It's thrilling, terrifying. It will make your heart pound out of your chest. A Quiet Place Day 1, now streaming.
Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, DFS. We got more games to cover. By the way, I'm going to have Nada put our $5 FFT DFS contest in the chat description. For those of you listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen, or watching on YouTube after the fact, that contest link will be in those descriptions as well. I got to say, our contest filled pretty quickly, or at least quicker than normal. It was, I think, all filled by Saturday. Usually it takes till Sunday morning to get that thing filled. So thank you for all just kind of joining in early, but just know that it does fill up. So go ahead and enter that contest sooner rather than later. All right, the next game, Vikings +3 at the Packers, 43.5 point total. I think this game has a lot of intrigue for some like obvious reasons. I think, the Vikings being 3-0 and the Packers mowing down teams with Malik Willis. We don't know if Jordan Love is going to be back. Aaron Jones goes back to Green Bay. I kind of like Aaron Jones, Meg, as a play in DFS at 6,400. I think it's not really the revenge game factor. I think he's going to get a lot of volume. I also like Justin Jefferson. On the other side, I kind of don't like anything. I'm curious to hear Mike on Josh Jacobs because I know he's been on him for 2 weeks in a row. But how about you, Meg? What do you like in this game?
Yeah, I love the Josh Jacobs volume, and despite if Love comes back or not, I'm just not interested in targeting. This Vikings defense looks elite, so don't know that I'll get to much on the Packers side, but as you mentioned, I do have some interest in, of course, I always have interest in Justin Jefferson, and then I do have some interest in Aaron Jones as well. So it's a matter of, again, the line of construction and how I can get there, but I do have interest in those 2 Vikings.
Okay, Mike, are we back on Josh Jacobs, and is there anybody on either side that you love this week?
Yeah, so I think Jacobs is definitely in the player pool. We'll see where the quarterback situation shakes out. I tend to think we could see Jordan Love. I think he was actually relatively, I think he was somewhat close. I think he's very close now. If not this week, next week for sure. So when I look at this matchup, though, it is one that is going to be competitive in division. I don't trust anything in this game, really. I like Justin Jefferson always. He's essentially matchup proof. We'll see if Jordan Addison goes. That changes things a bit on that Vikings offense. Aaron Jones, guy's been phenomenal so far. I don't know that I'm getting anywhere in this game, though. If I do, I think Jacobs is probably still my top player.
Yeah, this one's interesting. Let me ask you this. Is Justin Jefferson, Mike, getting enough ownership where, let me rephrase it. If I play Justin Jefferson, will I be relatively contrarian, or is he just as popular as he usually is?
Relatively contrarian, to about 10%. And guys we'll talk about later, Terry McLaurin's going to be almost 40%, right? Wow. So Deontay Johnson will be 20+%. Yeah, Nico. I think Nico will maybe get some love, but when I look at this, yeah, I think that the price point is clearly the reason for it, and maybe a little bit of the matchup. The question for me though is, I'm still likely going to take Jamar Chase over Justin Jefferson this week. I think it's very, very close, and I'm down to single digits on Jamar Chase and projected ownership, and I think they should both be around the 10% mark.
So this is part of the reason I like my Andy Dalton stack to Deontay Johnson so much, is because, and I've already built my FFT DFS lineup, which was very bad last week. I think the week before it was like 21st or something, but last week I was like close to last place, which again, these are tournaments, like you're the first or your last kind of situation. But I built a lineup, and I might change it, obviously, but it was Andy Dalton, Deontay Johnson. I was able to fit in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson into that lineup. So if you pay down a quarterback, it does allow you to maybe play both of those studs at the wide receiver position, which I don't think a lot of people are going to do. Let's move on to Steelers Colts. I'm kind of going back and forth here because the Steelers have some injuries that we need to kind of figure out. I think Najee Harris, I think he's probable. Jaylen Warren, I don't think he's playing. I think George Pickens is interesting in this one. I'm kind of an Anthony Richardson guy from a fantasy standpoint. He hasn't gotten there. Mike, I'm going to start with you. It's a 40-point total. This basically is, Steelers a very slight favorite here. Any interest in this one?
Not really. If you could get the price point on Michael Pittman to like 4,400 instead of 5,800, you could sign me up for something like that. But at 5,800, there are so many options on this slate. So I am, it's not fun to talk about, but I'm off of this game pretty much completely.
Yeah, Meg, it's hard for me to get to Jonathan Taylor considering some of the pay down and pay up options that I like. I'm not playing Michael Pittman. That receiver room is just kind of crashing and burning because of Anthony Richardson. Anything on either side? Oh, maybe Meg froze. I was going to say she's probably looking down at her notes.
Okay, am I back?
Oh, yeah, you are back. Actually, this is pretty good timing. I was asking if on the Colts or the Steelers side, you like anything, because Mike is kind of moving past this one.
Yeah, I will say Pickens has a great matchup, and I do have some interest in that because we know Pickens can erupt at any time, and Colts defense is not one to shy away from. So Pickens would be the one. Najee obviously is getting the volume, so with Warren likely out, I don't mind that. But Pickens is the one I'm interested in there at likely as a contrarian play.
Okay, Mike, I got a question for you from Jay Metz. He says, do we want to do a run back with an onslaught? So if you maybe explain what he means by onslaught, but does that always require a run back?
I do not think it requires a run back. It can. It really it's so specific on the individual player and just pricing, right? It really, the pricing matters more than anything. But what he's referring to as onslaught is, a couple weeks ago, we basically talked about the Saints running Derek Carr, Kamara, and Shaheed all together, or Olave all together. We've done it with Kansas City a few times in the past. And generally speaking, where those games typically get home is not the back and forth shootout. Those games typically get home in the 30 to 40 point blowout, generally.
Okay. And by the way, Big Cheesy says she looked deep in thought. Big Cheesy, thank you for being in here. Brad Betts is in here. A lot of this, the Early Edge gang is in here. Really appreciate you. Sites 501, certainly recognize you from this show. Quandor, you say Chuba or Pittman Jr. I mean, Meg, that's Chuba Hubbard every single time right now, right?
Right now, yeah, especially with the situation for Pittman in the passing game. Unless they put Flacco in, I'd say it's definitely Chuba.
Yeah, right. I mean, well, I don't know that we're super far off from that, from the highlight reel that I've seen over the last 3 weeks. But I think Anthony Richardson will play better. Mike, real quick, because I do want to boldface Chuba Hubbard for a second here, even though we've covered this Carolina game. You might have said this. Do you like him again this week? I know you were on him last week.
In the player pool for sure. I am still in the camp though that Cincinnati wins this game easily. So I'm not as super high on it, but definitely still in the player pool at the price point.
And are you willing to play Deontay Johnson in spite of very popular ownership?
Yeah. If I did it, I would pair it with Jamar Chase for sure, though. When I look at that matchup, the combo of those two ownership-wise definitely gets there for you. When you're talking, single digits on Jamar, it really helps.
Okay, let's move on to, I believe this is the last 1 o'clock game, and then we'll have the 4 games in our cheat sheets and top threes. Jaguars, Texans, pretty high total here, 45.5, I believe. Yeah, Jaguars are 6.5 point dogs. Texans implied total really high here at 26. I think we're waiting on news from Tank Dell, who was 5,400. I think he's got just a bit of an injury. Diggs, 6,600. Nico Collins, 7,200. Mixon, 6,800. I believe he's playing, but we need more news on that. The other side of the ball, it's pretty rough with the Jaguars. Mike, I start with you. It's a pretty high total, very high implied total for the Texans. How are we playing this one?
Yeah, this one is interesting. I don't know. I mean, I like Nico still. He still should be the number one receiver. I know Diggs has gotten a lot of looks so far. I don't think it's been a great thing for the Texans while doing that. We need more information on the running back situation for sure, because if not, you might have to play Cam Akers again. I see in the chat, Brenton Strange, it really depends on Ingram. If Evan Ingram is ruled out, then yes, Strange is going to be one of the better plays on the slate. But I expect the Jags to push in this game. I don't think the Texans are a very good team, and I think that they've been highly overrated from last season. So I think this game will be competitive back and forth. I think the ultimate contrarian play here that could get there is ETN in the backfield. Yeah. I think that he's going to be heavily involved catching passes, and that's really kind of where I'm at there. But as far as these other plays in this game, I really can't give you much until we know the status of Mixon and Evan Ingram, because they changed the usage quite a bit for both sides.
Yeah, Meg, obviously we are waiting on more news, but as it stands right now, anything you like in this one?
Yeah, Mike broke it down perfectly about waiting for news and who you would be leaning into based on that news. But I'd say I do have interest in Nico. I even have interest in Stroud Nico, but again, I'm trying to whittle down the quarterback pool. So likely for me, just interest in Nico and then waiting to hear the injury news.
You know what's interesting about this one, Mike? I haven't really seen much about this game. Is it fair to say that a CJ Stroud stack is not going to be super popular on this slate?
Yeah, definitely. Let me see if I can find Stroud in this. I would say, it's not unpopular by any means, but I don't think it's going to be mega popular.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not getting there. I'm just looking at the implied total, and I'm thinking, maybe CJ Stroud gets there with one or two of his receivers. If this ends up being a back and forth. Big Cheesy says he loves the Jags plus 6.5. Man, it is hard to put those two words together, love and Jags. They just look so bad. But listen, I was down on the Jags this year. I didn't think they were going to be very good. I thought they were going to be third in their division behind Houston and the Indianapolis Colts. We'll see if that comes true. I didn't think they'd look this bad. So anyway, speaking of bad, we've got a huge spread in our first 4 o'clock game. The Patriots getting 10 points at San Francisco. Speaking of injury news, obviously there's some injuries on the San Francisco side. We know we're not going to see CMC. I don't know about Debo. I don't think we're going to see him either. George Kittle is certainly a maybe. Brandon Ayuk, 6,400. Jawan Jennings, his price has gone up from 4,100 to 5,600. That makes sense. Eric Saubert, 2,700. I don't think he did anybody any favors. On the other side, Demario Douglas is interesting to me at 4,500. Ramondre Stevenson at 6,200. Meg, I'll start with you. This is a low total. Not something to get super excited about, but again, the 49ers implied total, it's always high. It's 25.5. Brock Purdy only 6,100. We get into this game. Jordan Mason, anything?
I don't have a ton of interest in this game, but we can't ignore what Jawan Jennings did. And so if all the 49ers weapons are out, then I'm definitely going to consider him because they obviously leaned on him heavily. Ayuk is still obviously adjusting to, not being in camp. So have a little interest in Jennings. Other than that, no. Mason looks really chalky to me. And if we got to see if Kittle's playing or not, but we can't ignore what Kittle does as a blocker too. And so if I think that was a big missing piece for them in the run game as well, with Kittle as a blocker. So waiting to hear on that, but don't have a ton of interest in this game.
Mike, are we kind of getting to a point with Jordan Mason where as the price starts to climb and as the ownership stays pretty high, that it's time to pivot, or are we just not there yet with him? I'm not sure I'm there yet with him, but I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to be in the player pool. As far as, I don't think he's going to be lock button status like he has been, earlier in the season, but I do think he should have his. The concern for me here is that they blow them out so bad that he's losing run late in this game. So I'm going to be off of it mostly. Mason's the only one in the player pool for me. Then if you want to take a shot on Ramondre Stevenson, I think it's okay, but I don't love it.
Let me ask you this. Meg, I'm going to ask you this because you're a big afternoon slate person like I am. Obviously, this next game we're going to talk about, which is Commanders Cardinals, is going to be the game, right? That people are going to want to see. And I'm just talking afternoon slate, but in the entire slate, the main slate, obviously, it's going to be a popular game. We're going to spend some time on it in a minute. But if you were going to do a contrarian stack, knowing that people are going to be on Jaden Daniels or Kyler Murray, wouldn't it be in this, for the afternoon slate, wouldn't it be in this 49ers game, and wouldn't it be Brock Purdy to Brandon Ayuk and or Juwan Jennings?
Yes, yeah, that would probably be the pivot one on the 4 p.m. slate. That makes a ton of sense, yeah.
Mike, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent candidate for an onslaught. And what I mean by that is it would probably be Purdy, Mason, Ayuk, and the defense. And just you're betting on a 31-0, 31-3 kind of game. That is something that I would definitely consider in probably not in full slate, but certainly in afternoon only.
And in that case, in afternoon only, you'd still get pieces from that Commanders Cardinals game. You just wouldn't be stacking it, just so we're clear.
Yes, you would get pieces from it. And where it would likely be is running backs. It'd likely be Robinson, and it would likely be James Conner, things like that. And potentially tight ends with Ertz, I think would be the best way to build those out.
All right. Well, how exciting. We get to talk about a game of interest behind a 2-1 Commanders team. Meg, I can't wait, but we got to wait a little longer. Let's hear a message from our partners.
CBS Sports HQ, giving you college football coverage unlike anyone else.
We're talking Big Ten.
Pre- and post-game coverage.
Are you encouraged the way that this team responded?
Along with breaking news.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
Highlights and expert analysis.
That streak could be in jeopardy here.
Sure. What was your main takeaway from this game? How impressive was his domination?
That really changed the football game.
Let's go ahead and have some more fun.
Another wild ending.
The chaos continues.
Turn to CBS Sports HQ.
We are back on Fantasy Football Today, DFS. Let's talk Commanders. Let's talk Cardinals. Meg, I'm going to start with you. I mean, it's hard to set this up because there's so many great plays, and I don't want to talk too much. But Trey McBride, we got to keep an eye on. You all both brought up Elijah Higgins at 3,100. Certainly a good play if Trey McBride doesn't play, and I don't think he's going to. Marvin Harrison popped up with an injury on the practice report. I don't think that's a big deal at all. I think Micah Wilson is interesting. James Conner at 6,500 and Kyler Murray at 6,800. And then I know the chat is already on this with Austin Eckler out. And credit to Austin Eckler. He's looked absolutely great through 3 games, but he has a concussion, didn't travel with the team. Jerry McNichols, honestly, not a super talented backup. Chris Rodriguez might get a snap or two, not super talented. So it does seem to be the Brian Robinson show, both in the run and pass game at 6,100. And then, of course, Scary Terry, Zach Ertz, all good plays. What do you like?
Most everything in this game. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about on the 1 p.m. slate, I absolutely love most everything in the Cincy Carolina game. In the 4 p.m. slate, I love most everything in this Washington Arizona game. So certainly you can, on the 4 p.m. slate, obviously onslaught overstack this game in general, but even on the main slate, when I said I like 2 quarterbacks from that one game, yeah, I like Dalton and Burrow, and I love Daniels and Kyler Murray here. So, and I'm willing to stack both. I will caution with Jaden Daniels, though. Keep in mind, this is still a low volume passing offense. He's had 24, 29, and 23 attempts because he does take off and run a lot. So Keith, I wouldn't overstack the pass catchers with Jaden Daniels. So if you're doing the Daniels side, I would do Daniels and maybe 1 pass catcher. Or you could do Daniels and Robinson soak up the touchdown equity, something like that. But I would just caution not to do Daniels and like 3 pass catchers if you're onslaughting this game, because that's not the way Daniels is likely going to get there. So almost all these skill players are in play on both sides. That I would just caution that from the Washington side. To Mike's point, I have a lot of interest in the running backs, especially if you do stack up another game. Brian Robinson will likely be lower owned, and I love Connor's spot here. Of course, my favorite stack is Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr., and the potential, if McBride is out, of playing a cheap Elijah Higgins. He would likely get the volume. Full disclosure, I know nothing about him as a prospect, but he should get the run and the routes. Yeah. So like all that side, like both sides, we'll be stacking both sides. We'll be stacking this game in different ways. And I do think it is contrarian if you stacked another game and played like Connor and Brian Robinson. I think that's an interesting angle as well. So it's like pick which way you want to go with it, but almost all players are in play here for me.
Yeah, Mike, Kyler is certainly going to be popular for good reason. I do think it's an interesting move to get the James Conner piece of this game and hope that, he gets like some of the touchdown equity, soaks some of that up. He should get a lot of run, I would think, in the run and pass game. But I know you like Kyler Murray.
Yeah, I do like Kyler Murray in this game. I just like the Cardinals team a lot. I think it's one of the better bets of the week. And Connor is, some of the volume can be discouraging at times, and there's a lot of mouths to feed here. But if McBride is out, I definitely think it helps a lot of people. I think it helps Connor, and I really, really think it could help Wilson as well. So Wilson's more speculative, especially, Wilson's someone that we wanted to speculate on in the past when he was 3K, but it's a lot less fun doing it at 4,200 or more. So I'll probably still be off there a little bit, but I do like Connor. I think Marvin Harrison Jr., while the price point is a little extreme, is fine. But mostly have some interest in Connor and Kyler Murray.
And on the other side of the ball, is it Brian Robinson, Terry McLaurin get out, or are you not getting to them?
I'll have them in the player pool. I like Robinson the most. I think he's going to touch the football a lot, and I do think he's just going to slide over and take those Eckler targets in the passing game personally. So I like that. And then I personally think Zach Ertz is definitely in play here. And when you look, there's a lot of options at tight end, potentially more emerging. Higgins on the other side is going to be popular. But when you look at Zach Ertz and when Jaden Daniels has gone to him, it's really kind of been when the game's on the line. And that's where I think that it's going to show up here, because I think the game's going to be on the line. I think they're going to be neutral or trailing. I don't have the scenario here where Washington's just up multiple scores in this game. If anything, I think they're down multiple scores and playing catch up. So I think Zach Ertz is definitely valid here.
All right, I want to ask you something before we move to the last two games, which we won't spend quite as much time on as this one. Mike, I'm going to start with you, and then Meg, I'm going to ask you the same question. Assume you're doing a stack and some sort of run back. It could be a double run back or one or whatever. Give me just the first one that comes to mind, maybe your favorite, like I start.
From this game? Yeah, I think that it's probably, honestly, it's a very contrarian look, but it's probably going to be Daniels and Robinson with no pass catcher. It's just going to be the rushing upside. It's still a run forward team. We don't necessarily think of that because we've seen some beautiful throws from Jaden Daniels recently. But it would be Daniels with Robinson and no pass catcher.
Any run back on the Arizona side with that one?
Probably not. If you want to play Connor, you can. But I'm going to play Caleb Williams in nearly every lineup this week. So it's going to be a lot of sprinkling in plays from this game. Yeah.
Okay, that must be music to your ears, Meg, because I know you had mentioned JD and B-Rob. So what would be your favorite stack and run back?
Certainly have interest in that, but I'll go what I said from the top, and that's Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., and run it back with, I think, a more contrarian Brian Robinson Jr. You talked earlier in the show about McLaurin's ownership being very high this week after that awesome Monday night game, but I think Brian Robinson's going to come lower on, and I agree with you guys that he's going to soak up those Eckler targets and usage. So I would say this would be my top stack, and maybe throw in the Higgins for a cheap tight end play. We'll see what his ownership comes in at when we fully get the McBride news, but I wouldn't mind throwing in Higgins on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Brian Robinson's ownership is going to tick up by the day, whereas he's going to end up being pretty popular. But we'll have to wait and see on that. All right, let's go to Browns at the Raiders. Not a super fun one for obvious reasons. It's a 37-point total, Browns +2. Meg, I'll start with you. I don't really have any interest anywhere here. I don't want to get cute with Devontae Adams. I think Brock Bowers is interesting at 5,600. On the other side of the ball, Amari Cooper coming off a good game. I'm not getting there at 6,300. Not getting to the running backs. This is just a no play for me. How about you?
No play for me as well. Again, another quarterback that I'm hoping they put in good old Winston soon.
I mean, it's getting there. Mike, is this a no play for you as well?
It is, yeah, no play for me.
Okay, I think we can move on. I mean, I just don't think there's anything to talk about with this game. Mike, I'm going to start with you on this one, and then we'll get to our cheat sheets and your top three, and maybe a comment or two. I know you haven't run your simulations yet, but a comment or two on Showdown perhaps when we close the show. But Chiefs at the Chargers. Chiefs do have a pretty high implied total, nearly 24. Chargers not so much at around 16. Chiefs 7.5-point favorites. I mean, I look at this game and I see Carson Steele, Mike, at 5,500. That looks pretty good. Rashee Rice at 7,300. That looks pretty good. Other than that, I don't think I like anything in this game. What say you?
Yeah, this one is fascinating. We're coming off a game where we saw Rashee Rice really be the target monster. 14 targets, 12 receptions. I think that was more of a product of the matchup and just the necessity of a team that just wasn't playing well. When I look at this one, I think this is a fine buy low spot on Travis Kelce, 5,800. Nobody is going to play him. We're talking 1% owned or less. No one is going to play Travis Kelce here. Personally, I think Harbaugh and company tried a scheme to take Rashee Rice out, especially the way Patrick Mahomes has struggled a bit this season. And I think it's a Travis Kelce spot. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on Kansas City's side to try to get them the ball. I think the defense is certainly in play. As far as the running game, I like Carson Steele. He's been incredibly efficient, and I expect that to continue. I do think Kareem Hunt mixes in quite a bit here. And I think that if the game is one where they can really play, and really, have this game in control, I think they experiment and really test a few things here going forward when they're introducing new bodies like that. But for me, we see it in the chat. It is related to Darvin James, excuse me. I think this is Travis Kelce's time. This is a matchup where I think Travis Kelce can really exploit it, because I think this Chargers defense is not built to defend a tight end like that without double teaming and sending a lot of extra coverage. And if they do that, Rashee Rice is going to have a field day. So I personally think the attention will actually go to Rashee Rice in this particular situation. So I do like Travis Kelce quite a bit.
Meg, anything in this one? Obviously, QJ, Quentin Johnston, kind of an emerging name. He's only 4,900. J.K. Dobbins, like I said, 6,300. And then I mentioned the Chiefs. Is this kind of a stay away for you? Or does Travis Kelce or Rashee Rice, Carson Steele, any interest here?
Mostly, I think Mike made a great point about Travis Kelce and his price and his ownership. I'm just likely paying down at tight end this week, so I don't see myself getting there, just more from a total pricing standpoint. I was interested in Carson Steele, but Mike makes some great points about, if they're likely playing from a big lead, would they experiment with Hunt? So I don't know how much Carson Steele will be in my player pool, but I don't know how much I'll get to him. Not a lot of interest on the Chargers side with the Herbert injury. 2 tackles out. That just makes me incredibly nervous. So,
yeah, good point about that. Mike, real quick, do you like the Chiefs to cover this big spread? I mean, it seems like too many points, right?
It's a big number. Look, Kansas City is historically not covered in these kind of situations, and they're a team that is pretty good at just getting in, getting out with the win. I do make the number up to 8.5. I would lean the Kansas City way. And it's mostly just this Chargers team is so beat up at this particular point. They're in a really, really rough spot. No home field advantage to speak of. It'll be basically 60-40 Chargers Chiefs fans in there in that building. So for me, I think it's an opportunity where it wouldn't shock me at all if Patrick Mahomes has a get right spot. We've all kind of talked about how he's struggled. He's admitted he's struggled. I personally like Travis Kelce a lot. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as to stack Mahomes with him. But I'm not betting him to cover. Wouldn't shock me at all, though, if it's an absolute blowout.
Yeah, Kelce, interesting if you're playing multiple lineups in that afternoon slate. I think that's where I might find myself headed that way in a little bit of a bounce back spot. I think he only has 8 receptions on the year and 0 touchdowns. So bounce back's coming at some point. I don't know how long he can sustain it. Let's go. By the way, I think the bye weeks start next week. So these shows will be a little bit shorter because we'll have a few less games to cover. I want to point that out because we're almost on an hour now. Meg, we're going to start with your cheat sheet. We're going to go through it real quick. Then we're going to go to my cheat sheet. And then, Mike, we're going to do your top 3 at each position. So, Meg, let's hear your top stack.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, and then I talked about during the game. It's Kyler Murray, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, until Washington proves otherwise, it's probably going to be my main stack each week, targeting the Washington secondary.
All right, and then we can just go through it. Give us your chalk buy, your chalk fade, contrarian, and your value play.
Sure. Deontay Johnson, who I know you guys love as well. Chalk buy for me, totally worth it. Looks great with Andy Dalton. Chalk fade is Jordan Mason. I'm concerned, especially if Kittle is out. He's a big key to that blocking too. So, and just his ownership's so high, I'd rather go to like a Connor, quite honestly, or a Brian Robinson at likely, even if they steam likely still lower ownership than Mason. Contrarian play is George Pickens. He has a excellent matchup against that Colts secondary, and I just don't think many people will get to him. And then my value play is Elijah Higgins. Do not know much about him as a prospect, but I know he's cheap going against a bad Washington defense, and should get some of the volume in the passing game. And this is a if McBride is out, obviously.
Yeah, I like all those plays, and I do anticipate McBride being out. I'll go Andy Dalton to Deontay Johnson, like I said in our Hellman's Mayo segment. That 5,300 to 5,600 allows you to do a lot of stuff, including throwing in Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson in your lineup or whatever. Jamar Chase and one of those high-end running backs if you want to play an Alvin Kamara or Breece Hall or something like that. My chalk buy is Jamar Chase at 7,700. My chalk fade is going to be Breece Hall. If I'm going to pay up at running back, I think I would probably do it with Alvin Kamara, or I'd drop down to like a Kyren Williams scenario. But it would probably be, of those three I just mentioned, it would probably be Alvin Kamara. So I'll be off Breece, especially since I'm paying down at running back largely, playing guys like Brian Robinson, maybe Chuba Hubbard. Let's see, my contrarian play. This isn't super contrarian, by the way, but it's relatively contrarian. Aaron Jones, he's not a top 10 running back ownership-wise, so it's not like he's a 3% owned running back. We'll see how it shakes out on Sunday. But I do like Aaron Jones at Green Bay, getting a ton of work. He's been pretty good this season. My value play is going to be Michael Wilson, 4,200. A lot of value plays you can play on this slate. We talked about a lot of them. I love what Michael Wilson did last week specifically. I do think he's just going to be a target guy, especially if Trey McBride is out. I think he's going to soak up at least a couple more targets as a result of that. Mike, your top three at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and we'll start at quarterback.
Quarterbacks, I'm going Caleb Williams, number one. It's just a price point play and a matchup against a really, really poor defensive unit. So I like Caleb Williams here. I think he takes a massive step forward. Number two, going to be Jaden Daniels, just the rushing upside, and I think the trailing game script. So I like the other side with Kyler Murray a lot. Kyler Murray's number three. It's just Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray. But I think Daniels will have just slightly more upside because I do think they fall behind 2 scores in this game. And are really pushing and playing catch up. And I expect spectacular things there. So Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray.
All right, running back.
Brian Robinson. I want to pair it with Jaden Daniels. I think it's the running game. You know, we talk about this team. They are a run-forward team, and these two guys are elite. So I love Brian Robinson here. James Conner and Kyren Williams. The Rams, I think the passing game is going to be beat up. Kyren Williams is going to touch the football a ton, also in the passing game. And it's a nice bring back on the other side with Caleb Williams. So Brian Robinson, James Conner, Kyren Williams, my 3 running backs.
All right. Yeah, I like all of those looks. Wide receiver.
Jamar Chase, number one. I love him at the top. I have him as the top overall wide receiver on the slate this week. Chris Olave. I like Chris Olave a lot too. I think that this is a really good bounce back spot for the Saints. Looking at what Rashee Rice just did to the Falcons, I think we see a very similar performance from Olave. And then Deontay Johnson, just a price point play. The chalk will be there. Will not be as popular as Terry McLaurin. So I do like Deontay Johnson here. Also pairing it in that stack with Jamar Chase. So it's going to be Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Deontay Johnson.
Okay, and then finally, tight end.
Elijah Higgins. I don't think McBride's playing with that concussion. Travis Kelce, number two. I think this is an awesome buy low opportunity on Travis Kelce. No one is going to play him this week at all. Wouldn't shock me if we get situations where they force the ball his way, get him that first touchdown, kind of break that what he's got going on. So I like that a lot. And then Dallas Goedert. I'm going to play the chalk there a little bit. I think it's a volume standpoint. Like I think he's going to be targeted 8 to 10 times again. So give me Dallas Goedert.
My quick question, because Big Cheesy's in the chat, he is pointing out something about going back to that Browns game. That was pretty much a pass for all of us. Jerome Ford, we don't know that he is playing. He's got a knee issue. If that's the case, do we go to Deontay Foreman? Is that a play?
He could be a play. It really just, we need to know that information on Mixon as well, because I would go back to the well on Cam Akers a bit first. Just think there'll be some passing volume there still. So yeah, I do not, unfortunately a little too early for me to really get in there, but having said all of that, I think there's enough value, especially where I'm paying down for Caleb Williams at quarterback. I don't really foresee myself being in that situation where I need to really invest there.
Good point. Me with Andy Dalton. I mean, you're paying up a little bit with Kyler Murray, but there's a lot of quarterbacks you can pay down for on this slate, which might you might not need to go down to a 4,300 Deontay Foreman because you can pay up for Brian Robinson, for example, or one of those Chuba Hubbards, or even one of those high-end running backs that we've all talked about. All right, Mike, real quick, we've got the Giants at home against the Dallas Cowboys, and I know it's too early for you to have run your simulations and your lineups, but just the thought on how you would play it big picture.
Yeah, big on Cowboys. I mean, it's an absolute must-win game for the Cowboys here. If they don't win this, their season could potentially be over. Their next 6 games are absolutely brutal for them. I don't think they'll be favored in any of the 6 games. If they are, they will be a slight 1-point favorite in a couple of those games. So when I look at this spot, CeeDee Lamb's been extremely vocal over the last week. I think they force feed it there. Not groundbreaking anything. CeeDee Lamb, is he a good play? Yes, absolutely. I think the real play here is to fade Malik Neighbors. I think he's going to see a ton of attention, double coverage. So I will be fading Neighbors a lot. And then kicking game. Always talk about kickers when you get to Showdown. I think Brandon Aubrey is definitely going to be there. But I do like some Dallas onslaughts here with Dallas defense, special teams, Aubrey, CeeDee Lamb, Dak. I think that's a very strong build tonight.
Meg, I'm going to ask you if you like any bets or DFS plays for this game, but I do want to point out, and it kind of goes with what Mike said, if you're fading Malik Neighbors, you might like Wan'Dale Robinson on the early edge. This morning I put it out on Sportsline. If you're a member, all of you should be a member, sportsline.com/join. If you type in the promo code winners, you get 60% off the annual plan. But anyway, Wan'Dale Robinson was my play on Sportsline, over 33.5 receiving yards. And then yesterday, I'm kind of big on Rico Dowdle, getting some yards against this Giants rush defense that is not very good. So I took his over 39.5 rushing yards. Meg, anything you like tonight?
I like both of those. I'm probably going to do what I did on Monday night with Burrow Chase and just do a ladder with him and his alpha receiver. And so I hit both of them individually, laddering up Burrow and Chase. I'll likely do that with Dak and CeeDee. And then I laddered them together, and I got 2 out of the 3 ladders with Burrow and Chase. And I will likely do that with Dak and CeeDee Lamb tonight too.
Reminds me, I laddered Noah Brown the other day.
I heard that call. That was a great call.
Thank you. Well, so I had his over 16.5 receiving yards. That came in very easily.
Yeah.
And then I had him 25 plus, 40 plus, and 50 plus. And we got the 25 plus.
Right.
But the big money for me was on the 40 plus. But because Washington was winning, I mean, they just were like, Noah Brown comes in, like, Mike said about Zach Ertz when the game's on the line. Noah Brown's that guy that has the big catch on 3rd down and like gets a 16-yard gain, and point of catch is amazing and all that stuff. So we needed a different type of game script to get there. But
I had a heart. The ladder plays are fun, and I loved your Noah Brown call. I had a heartbreaker. Eckler was going crazy in the run and pass game. I laddered him at 25, 40, and 50, and I got his line, but then I laddered him, and if he doesn't have that concussion, I think he gets to at least 40 receiving.
Just a great call on Eckler. Great player, great person, by the way.
Yeah.
Rico Dowdle, anytime touchdown, says Big Cheesy. I'm going to leave everybody with this. Has nothing to do with FFT DFS. But your first touchdown score tonight is Jake Ferguson at plus 1,200. You're welcome, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you joined the contest. Again, if you're still in the chat, thank you for being in here. Hopefully you hit the like button. But more importantly, join the contest. It's only $5. If you're listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, go ahead and review us. That would be great. Give us 5 stars. Maybe say a few words about Mike, Meg, or myself, or Nada on the 1s and 2s. Would really appreciate that. Thanks, everybody. We're going to see you next Thursday. Let's have a great week 4, and go Commanders. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS. On behalf of Mike, Meg, and Nada, we'll see you next week.